And to our last and final speaker, Garo Paylan. You call yourself an Armenian, but what makes you an Armenian if you do nothing for your culture and language? I want Armenians to get rid of their fears and feel strong and powerful again. That quote from Garo Paylan summarizes his worldwide and summarizes his life of action. Born to an Armenian family with roots from Mush and Malatya, Garo Paylan became one of the first Armenian members of Turkish Parliament in 2015, elected in a district in Istanbul. As a representative and a co-founder of the People's Democratic Party, Paylan has been at the forefront of human rights and activism in Turkey, constantly raising Kurdish, Armenian, and progressive issues. Prior to being elected to Parliament, Paylan served as a board member of the Armenian schools in Istanbul, involved in new textbooks, new materials to be used in Armenian language teaching. Upon his election, Garo Paylan vowed to fight against Armenian genocide denial and fight for minority rights within Turkey. In April 2016, during his unprecedented speech in the Turkish Parliament, Garo Paylan commemorated the 101st anniversary of the Armenian genocide by recalling the names of the Armenian politicians, intellectuals, and leaders who were arrested and murdered during the onset of the Armenian genocide. Talking about Turkey, Paylan has said, "These are the lands Armenians lived on for thousands of years, and these were the people who were defending our will to live together with democratic values." 100 years ago, Turkey was a multinational country. In 1908, 1 in 5 in the Ottoman Empire was Armenian. The aim of the genocide was to leave behind only one identity. Garo Paylan condemned Turkey and announced that it has to come to terms with its history. Paylan suggested the formal investigation into the death of the Armenian intellectuals on April 24, 1915, and discussed the importance of facing injustice of its past. Recalling the memories of the Armenians murdered in the genocide, Garo Paylan summed up his speech by the words, "Asbarez irենց հոգին լուսավոր է." Like all Armenians all over the world, I followed his speech with tears in my eyes, proud to see that we have such a courageous activist who is not afraid of putting his life at stake. For several years, Garo Paylan has been involved in the court case struggling to bring Hrant Dink's murder to justice. Garo Paylan was temporarily suspended from Parliament for using the word genocide during discussion on constitutional changes. He has faced threats and physical violence, but has continued his fearless struggle with the help of the large group of supporters within Turkey and throughout the Armenian diaspora, right here. Garo Paylan is a truly and outstanding brave hero of our times and who openly speaks up about Armenian issues. And with great dedication, I am honored to introduce him to you all. Thank you.
Welcome back, Garo. It was around this time last year that you were here in Los Angeles, and a lot has changed. You spoke about the genocide once again in the parliament, after which you were suspended for attending parliament sessions. Your federal party members and the leaders of the HDP were arrested and continue to remain in jail. The use of the word genocide in parliament was abolished. You are currently pursuing the lawsuit against an official who insulted someone by calling them Armenian. Turkey has become the largest jailer of journalists and human rights activists. How's it going for you?
Very well.
Good to have you back. I can't imagine living in a country where the mayor of its capital, Ankara, urges the public to pray for more hurricanes to afflict the United States so they don't meddle in the affairs of Turkey. This is, for me, just, I'm completely dumbfounded that someone can do that. But here you are, living in that country and struggling with the everyday oppression that goes on there. My first question is about the Hrant Dink trial. It seems with the whole Gulen movement, all of a sudden, official Ankara is finding that Gulen was actually responsible for the murder of Hrant Dink. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Thank you. Hello, everyone, first of all. First of all, I'm just suffering just because of this jet lag. First of all, it is 3 a.m. in Istanbul now, and this is a 3 a.m. Garo. First of all, I have to say that. I'll try my best. As you said, nowadays our government is trying to say that the Gulenists killed Hrant Dink. But it was 7 years ago, and the state said the Ergenekon actors, which are the nationalist deep state actors, killed Hrant Dink. They used to say that. But we say the state officers or the state killed Hrant Dink. We always said that. Because all our institutions' finger was in that murder. I can say our intelligence service, the military, police officers, our governor, Istanbul's governor, Trabzon's governor, and so many officers, which means the state, of course. If you know that Hrant Dink is going to be killed, and if you don't stop that murder, then the state is guilty. Of course, there were several powers. They thought the same thing, Hrant Dink has to die, but they had different agendas, of course. Let's say Gulenists knew about that Hrant Dink is going to be murdered, but they just opened the ways of that murder to take the advantage of that murder. Because Turkey was on the way of the European Union, and they wanted to show that the Ergenekon forces, which are the old deep state forces, are killing the Christians. They wanted to show that to the Western powers, to show that Hrant Dink was killed, murdered, or Chris Santoro, or other murders against the Christians, to show that the old deep state is killing the Christians. But their agenda was to take the power instead of that old deep state. Unfortunately, they had that goal, and they had the power, the Gulenists, I can say, after 2008, 9 and 10. But they used this force again against the Democrats, and there was a power struggle, as you know, before the coup attempt between the Erdogan forces and the Gulenist forces. And after that power struggle, Erdogan got the power, and now Erdogan is using the same power against all the Democrats. Of course, now Erdogan wants to show to the world that the Gulenists killed Hrant Dink. But we say, of course, there were actors who knew, the Gulenist actors who were in that murder, but not only the Gulenists, of course. All the state forces were in that murder.
So can we expect some kind of justice for Dink's murder at any point?
It has been 10 years. No, there is no sincere act, unfortunately. Only they are using this case, as I said, now to blame Gulen. It doesn't work like that. There are several state officers. We don't want to call them like Gulenists or the old deep state forces. The state has to say that let's say, they were Gulenists, but they were intelligence service officers. So they have to confess that it is another state's murder. So if they don't confess that, there will be no justice for Hrant.
Moving on to the whole HDP situation, can you please just update us with what's going on since the arrest of some of its leaders? Where do you stand in the party, and where is the party going with all of these matters against it?
You know, I'm one of the founders of my party. I'm proud of that because it's a diverse party, first of all. But we got, let's say, 13% of the votes, and 80 members of the parliament was from our party. But the state was not happy with that, and they started the war, and they ended the peace process. And nowadays, everyone is more nationalist, unfortunately. Every day there are crimes, especially against the Kurds. And when this is a vicious circle, as you can imagine. If you just follow the nationalist policies, let's say the Turkish camp, they established a fascist coalition with the nationalist party, as I said, the Erdogan, the Kurds are becoming nationalists as well. But still we are struggling against this nationalism vicious circle. Because it's a vicious circle, as I said. It's a huge danger against democracy in all over the region, not only in Turkey as well. So our co-chairs are jailed, our deputies are jailed, our mayors are jailed. 6,000 of our members of our party are jailed. 6,000. So many people are asking me, if let's say 10% of this happened to any party in the world, that party would collapse. Still we are struggling against this. Still. We are still struggling, and we are still vodkiyen inç güzel mesela. Yani and you know what? You might call me naive or romantic, but we are really romantic politicians. And in these kind of very dark winters, we really need romantic politicians. I know in the world, everywhere, there are crazy leaders, and this is a very dark winter for the liberal democracy, I can say. Everyone is shouting at each other, and this vicious circle is going on between the identities, between religions, and everywhere Islamophobia and other phobias. And this is a very dark winter for the liberal democracy. We have to think about it. We have to find other visions instead of vicious circles, fights, wars, and shouting at each other. But as I said, in Turkey, all the parties are nationalist, unfortunately, the left-wing and the right-wing parties. When it comes to the Kurds, when it comes to the Armenians, they say the same thing. But we have now 59 MPs in the second election, but 59 MPs still are struggling against fascism.
I guess winter is also coming in Ankara and Turkey, and not just on Game of Thrones.
Or Mad Max.
Or Mad Max. But in this climate, who are your allies within Turkey? Who are you collaborating with to be able to advance this agenda, which is based on humanity, justice, human rights. How are you doing that on a daily basis?
You know what? I have so many friends, let's say. We had a wonderful spring, I can say. And when I look back, of course, those days were not easy days. But still, when I look back, it was a spring. And I met so many friends before and after Hrant Dink's murder. And I have Democrat Kurdish friends, Turkish friends, and other identity from the other identities. And still, there are millions of people. But the problem is that now, as I said, they have a fascist coalition. And they just cover all the media, and we don't have any media coverage at all. And every night, they are talking about nationalism and swearing at our party. Still, people don't want the war. But unfortunately, if your governments decide what is the conditions, we are struggling against this, but our power is not enough. The problem is that the biggest problem, I can say, from the European Union, let's say, you know Merkel, Chancellor Merkel, and when this refugee crisis has started 2 years ago or 3 years ago, then hundreds of thousands of refugees were running to Europe. Erdogan just benefited from that crisis and used refugees as a weapon against Europe. But Merkel came several times to Turkey, just asked from Tayyip Erdogan not to send those refugees. But the demand was to turn a blind eye on the human rights violations. Erdogan's demand was that. And she did it, unfortunately. When the European Union or the Western powers, let's say, including the United States, turn a blind eye on the human rights violations, countries like Turkey easily become a hell. Because there is an unpunished crime in Turkey, which is the genocide. And you can easily prepare the conditions of the genocide again if some powers, some liberal order turns a blind eye on the human rights violations. Unfortunately, in these 20 years, we made a wall brick by brick, which is a goodwill, I can say. But the evil can really demolish that wall in months, which we could see that, unfortunately. So the responsibility of the Western powers is so big for this winter, I can say. Especially, of course, the Trump administration is all the same, your administration. I can blame that as well. Because, Erdogan's, let's say, security forces, did several bad things in Washington. Even after that, Trump didn't criticize Erdogan because of that. If he can do this in the center of Washington, imagine what he can do to us in Ankara or in Istanbul. So if you turn a blind eye on the human rights violations, even in Washington, everywhere can be a Mad Max. We have to think about it. We have to establish another vision for the world. Because, in Mosul, let's say, one of the Iraqi cities, now the American forces are bombing, let's say, civilians. You don't care about it because it's understandable. We have a trauma about ISIS, let's say. But the civilians are dying there. And if you kill, let's say, 100,000 civilians, they have relatives, hundreds of thousands of relatives, and they become radical. And one day a maniac comes here and kills several civilians here as well. This is a vicious circle. It doesn't work like that. To just turning a blind eye on the human rights violations is not going to be good for the human race at all. At the end, we have to think about it, and we have to establish another vision.
One of the things that you said last year that you were here, and it kind of stuck in my mind, was that we all survived the genocide, but you stayed. and you're advancing the Armenian cause from the very place that it occurred. I want to go back to come back to 2017 and ask how the Armenian community, especially in Istanbul, is coping with all of the changes that are happening around, because I'm also sensing that they're becoming more, they're willing to take on the cause on their shoulders right now, especially the new generation. So how is the community coping with everything that's going on?
After, let's say, decades of silence, we have started to talk with Hrant Dink, of course, but Hrant Dink took the courage from the Kurds, I can say. So many people have started to struggle and had demands about democracy and equality in the 1990s, we can say. And we had the courage from Hrant Dink, of course. But let's say, as I said, after a wonderful spring, when I look back, we are living a very, very dark winter. And these kind of dark winters, minorities live in fear. And the fear factor is everywhere in my community, especially the Armenians, the Jews. Every day there are hate speeches against the Jews in Turkey and against the Armenians as well. So now they want to stay silent. But I always say to stay silent doesn't mean you are safe. It doesn't mean that, because we stayed silent during the genocide days as well. Or what did we do in 6-7 September 1955 events? Or you can give the example that Hrant Dink was speaking, and what happened to Hrant Dink. Some people tell me about Hrant Dink, what happened to him, and you can live the same thing. And I always give the same example. What about Sevak Balıkçı? You know Sevak Balıkçı, I guess. Yes. Yeah, 5 years ago, they killed him as well when he was having his military service. They didn't say any word about Armenian genocide. They killed him as well. So when this fascist coalition is in charge, and when there is a nationalism is taking lots of power, the minorities cannot be safe. Especially our state had done several crimes and didn't pay the price of it. So I always tell to my people to stay silent is not safe. When you have right, and you have to raise sound. And I can say, whenever I raise sound, it works, because they care about me and they don't want those human rights violations to be on the media, and that is why I'm trying to raise sound. Of course, I care about my people's fears, concerns. That is why I do these things in a diplomatic way, but I always tell my people to stay silent doesn't mean we are safe.
But I am also noticing some kind of a movement within the community, a positive one, where it concerns the election of the new patriarch. There was a lot of dust back in February and March with the internal palace intrigue of the Istanbul Patriarchate. Where are we now with that process? And can the people actually reclaim the Patriarchate and make it their own?
Unfortunately, we need that election. That chair is empty, and we are suffering just because we don't have the elections. But the problem is that when in this kind of atmosphere, now there are people from our community as well who are trying to use that fear, From in our community, some people think they are very important and have ties with the government, let's say. And they say, we shouldn't make the government mad. We shouldn't make the government mad. But why should they be mad because of the elections? No. So some people from our community uses this fear, and that is why the state says you have different thoughts in your community. That's why I'm not giving you the permission for the elections. But I'm talking to so many ministers and prime minister about this election, and I guess soon in these months we will have that election.
And you think it will be something where actually the community will have its voice represented, or will it be another Ateşyan that's going to take the...
No, don't worry. I really, when we have that ballot box, we will have a great leader which we will be proud of. Because no leader has the right to do these kind of things, no? Especially Istanbul is a very important center for the Armenian world. So we need a leader who can be the leader of all the Armenian world, I can say. Not only both sides. It's very important for all the Armenian world, and we will have a great leader, don't worry, when we have that ballot box.
How has the current crisis in Turkey, especially with the suppression and oppression of the Kurds in the east, impacted the so-called resurgence of the hidden Armenians and the Armenian communities that are still, let's say, in Diyarbakir and elsewhere around that area?
You know what, so many people confess that they have Armenian roots, and still it is like that. But again, it is harder for people to say it loudly. But, I guess some millions of people have Armenian relatives. I can't say they are Armenian, but so many, they say some 100,000 girls now have been taken, and they made wives, and they have millions of grandsons. They have Armenian roots, but relatives, I can say. But there are some places where people still speak Armenian, and they converted to Islam, let's say, all those territories. There are some 100,000 of Muslimized Armenians, and they say we are Armenian, but we are Muslim. But there the problem starts. Our patriarchy says whoever is not a Christian cannot be an Armenian. But that's the problem. But when things go better in Turkey, I'm sure we will find a way to relate with those Armenians as well.
But is the current issue that's happening in the Kurdish regions of Turkey impacting some of the Armenian communities there right now? And how is that impacting them?
The Armenians living there? Yeah, there are not so many Armenians, who. That is why, of course, it affects them as well. And there are so little minorities, and they are living those neighborhoods. So many people are living those neighborhoods, unfortunately.
So you went back to Armenia in September,
yes.
First time as a member of the Turkish Parliament.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
It was heaven, really, for me that week, I can say, because, as you know, we are struggling in Turkey, and after, as I said, living in that winter for 2 years, it was a great week for me. I really, that week, I can't even walk in the streets of Armenia. Everybody knows me because I was not expecting that much, of course. So I'm so happy, what can I say? But the purpose of my visit was, I spoke to my government, Turkey's government, that I will go to Armenia. And I am a member of the Turkish Parliament, but there is no ties between Turkey and Armenia, and I will try to establish that. I will try to offer to the Armenian ministers and president to again have a relation between Turkey and Armenia. And I took those messages from our Secretary of State and some ministers as well, and went to Armenia to ask for them again, are you ready for relations? But Armenia is no longer 2009 Armenia. Armenia is more confident. That's why I'm very happy. And Armenia is stronger, and Armenia and Turkey is weaker, unfortunately, because a democratic Turkey was stronger. Armenia is on a very good way, I can say. Of course, there are several problems. I can say hundreds of problems about Armenia, of course. But Armenia is going up and Turkey is going down. But still, I offer to my government, Turkey is just building a wall around Turkey, and you are just walking in a nationalist way. We have to break this. If we can't break this, Turkey will be a Turkish state, and the Kurds are going to establish their countries, and Armenia is going to be a nationalist Armenia, Turkey is going to be a nationalist Turkey, Kurds are going to be a nationalist Kurds. It is no good for all the Middle East. So we need to break this vicious circle, and if we can't break this, it can establish an earthquake for all the region, and it will be no good for Turkey, Kurdistan, or Armenia, which is our common land. So I went to Armenia to tell about those concerns, and they said we are somehow ready again to negotiate. And when I turned back to Turkey, I told about these things to the Secretary of State, and they will just try to find a way. And I said, I am ready to take responsibility to establish the relations.
It just happens that when you made those overtures to the Armenian government, the president of Armenia at the United Nations announced that it is withdrawing or pulling back the ill-fated and dangerous protocols that all of them entered into. Where do you see that process going?
Yeah, it is not important really, because it was 2009 protocol. Now it's over. Armenia is not that Armenia, Turkey is not that Turkey anymore. So we need to have a clean paper, and the starting sentence has to be Turkey opened the Armenian border. That has to be a starting sentence. We will try to do that first of all. Then, if you have a neighbor and the door is closed, there is nothing. You have to open the door first of all, and you have to engage with that neighbor, and then you can have a right to tell about the problems about each other.
You have so many things going on a daily basis. First, you have your party activities that you're involved in. Then there's a community. Then there's all these other issues. What are your expectations from, let's say, the Armenian American community here in Los Angeles and elsewhere? Since last year you have toured, you went to Boston, you were also in Toronto, and folks, tomorrow Garo Paylan is being honored by the ANC during the banquet. So what can we do? Because as I said last year when you and I were sharing a stage again, that I believe that in the process of addressing Armenian national issues, we really need to look at the Turkish-Armenian community and add it to the elements that we work toward. And we, I think, are ready to take some action, but we're waiting for some kind of a signal from you. What can we do in this process?
No, but last year, if there are some people who listened to my speech, I was more optimistic, as you remember. And now some people might say, see what happened, Turks are Turks. Now there are sayings like that, Turks are Turks. No. It is easy to say that, so easy. Turks are not Turks. I know so many Turks who are more standing next to my struggle, about Armenian genocide, about that is very important, And I know so many Kurds who are struggling for Armenian genocide, That is very important. Turks are not Turks. The problem is that our government has established a nationalist coalition with the fascist forces. That is the problem. But from the world, from the Western powers, from Trump administration, no criticism is coming for this nationalist coalition. And our president is an opportunist leader. He cares about options, He has no other option. He established a coalition with the Gulenists, and they had a power struggle. And after that, there was only one power who he can make a coalition with the nationalists. But, as I said, in the world, the liberal order is dying, It's suffering. And everywhere, all over the world, this populist wave is everywhere. This is the biggest problem. So to get over this, now I know millions of people, and they were in a good way to say that something bad has happened. Let's say, till 2 years ago, they were saying that something bad has happened in 2015. Of course, they don't call it genocide, but the word is not important. That is what I always say. That word has to tell about what happened, of course, in 1915, but they were ready to say that something bad has happened to the Armenians in 1915. That was very important. But now we are losing that. As I said, only a democratic Turkey and only the Democrats can recognize the genocide. Democrat Turks can recognize the genocide. That is our goal. That is all the Democrats' goal has to be that. Even if another century passes and Turkey goes in this nationalist way, they will never ever recognize the genocide. Never. It is not going to happen. So we need a democratic Turkey for our wound to be healed.
One of the things that has recently happened late last month, was the Iraqi Kurdistan independence referendum. And we can kind of somehow tie it into what's happening right now in Catalan. How do you view those two issues, especially the Kurdistan thing, because it touches on your party's aspects and constituency?
My party and me, we just have the full respect for the nations to define its fate, and it's our program as well. But we don't believe in borders. We believe in local democracy. That is very important. The borders shouldn't be important, because we can't really define the borders. Where is Armenia, where is Kurdistan, where is Turkey? But we can define the local governments. Then we can have federations or confederations. But this doesn't mean to divide the country or define the borders. It doesn't mean that. My party believes in local democracy, and to give the power from the center to the locals that you can understand easily. That is our goal, to give the power from centers to locals, and the locals has to respect to the minorities, especially. Where Kurds are the majority, has to respect the minorities. Where Turks are the majority, has to respect the minorities. That is our goal.
So you also said that the movements that were more democratic and were able to, let's say, address the issue of the genocide 2 years ago are not doing it because of the nationalist surge in the country. So where have those organizations gone? The same organizations that were staging events on April 24th in Gezi Square and elsewhere in Istanbul. What are they doing right now?
They are in jail. No?
Well, we're happy that you're not in jail and you're here with us.
So many academics signed declarations saying mothers shouldn't cry or we want peace. They are jailing those academics. They are jailing the journalist who asks about peace. No, even this week, a teacher was sentenced to 2 years, I guess. She's going to be jailed. On a TV program, she said, mothers shouldn't cry. And they sentenced that teacher for 2 years, no? It's crazy, really. Whatever you say, about telling about conscience, they say this is a support to terrorism. No, somehow everything is crazy, unfortunately.
What is the future of democracy in Turkey? There was a time that the AKP was deemed as the democratic secular element that brought on change, but right now the same party is retreating and taking all of those freedoms away.
No, the nationalists or the who want to go on with this, nationalist policies, they don't want to hear about a word about conscience, as I said, no. But because it says about that king is naked, you always follow the nationalist policies. Unfortunately, there is no AKP. They established AKP to get rid of the nationalist policies, all the military policies. But unfortunately, the more Erdogan got the power, he got rid of his Democrat friends, and he is lonely nowadays. He thinks he is powerful, but he is not. The status quo is powerful, and unfortunately we lost that chance, and that might cost to Turkey for decades, to establish another democratic party. So, as I said, we lost that chance by losing AKP and those conservative Democrats, I can say. Now there is only Tayyip Erdogan and his nationalist friends, and they are following the nationalist policies. That if we don't have another alternative, my party is still struggling, but we need a partner to establish another peace process. That is very important.
Just a couple of hours ago, we had two very important leaders of Congress, the chairman of the House Foreign Relations Committee, Ed Royce, and the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff. I'm sure you've heard of those names. They're echoing some of the things that you're saying right here in the same hall. How is it that you or other members of parliament are unable to work with these forces to advance some of these issues that are common?
We have really ties between the members of the Congress and from the other countries as well. The problem is that, of course, these kind of relations are important, but they smile to your face and they say these things are wrong, but when they turn to Congress, they think about the interests. This is the problem, this is a huge problem, and as I said, the liberal order or the democratic order is dying, and the first interest, when the first interest is not the liberal order, if the first interest is just making big deals, business or other things, now it is like that. Unfortunately, Trump only tells about business, and unfortunately, it is all like this. Sometimes they give decisions, but the most important thing is, do you have any leverage on Tayyip Erdogan? The answer is no. Do you have any leverage on other autocrat leaders? The answer is no. Let's say the Bush administration was terrible. The Bush administration had a hammer in his hand and only just using that hammer like demolishing everywhere. Then Obama said, no, I'm not going to get involved with any of these world problems, and just stepped back, and it was bad as well, of course. Now Trump said, okay, I have a hammer and I will make business, that is it, and it doesn't work like this. I'm repeating myself, I know, but the NGOs or other organizations has to think about this. How we will get out of this winter for the liberal democracy.
As you've noticed last time you were here, I remember speaking to you after you visited one of our schools, the Rosen Alex Pilibos School, and you were very impressed at the reception that the young people gave you. You got a similar reception here from the young people, and you are really a role model to young Armenians around the world. What is your message to them as they are engaged in the same activity and the same cause that you are?
Somehow a clock has stopped in 1915 for the Armenian culture. And we have an open wound, and it has to be healed as soon as possible. Whatever we did for this 100 years is very important, all the institutions. I have full respect for all these efforts. But it didn't work. We couldn't, my uncle Capriel died 4 months ago, the second generation, and he couldn't have that justice for his pain. He had to leave his country, and he didn't want to, In 1970s, he had to leave his country, and he passed. He was the second generation. He passed without the justice. Now people are passing without the justices, and the second generation. We don't have this right. It didn't work because what we did, we couldn't, reach that justice. So we need to really think. What is our strategy? We need to establish another strategy. That is, we are from Anatolia. We forgot about it. We always tell things, but we are from Malatya, Kayseri, Dikranagar, Istanbul, Bursa, or other cities of Turkey. Nowadays, Anatolia, of course. We need to engage with those cities. So we need to find a way to engage. I was in Armenia. Of course we care about Armenia, and I'm very happy that Armenia is stronger. We care about Arsa, it's very important. But Armenia doesn't have a vision for the historical Armenia. Now, I didn't hear almost nothing, only telling that, of course, we have right to be mad at Turkey. But the problem is that if you want a justice for the genocide, we need to somehow solve this problem in Turkey, where that crime has happened. So I can just recommend to the Armenian youth, the 4th or the 5th generation, to engage with Anatolia. I'm not saying Turkey. To just have a discourse with the Turks, with the Kurds, to just establish another discourse with the Turks and the Kurds to solve this problem. Because I spoke last week, 3 days ago, before I came here, I spoke with the Secretary of State of Turkey. And he told me that, you know what, I'm going to Baku, and I went to Yerevan as well. We have so many common things with Armenia. We have more common things than Baku, with Armenia. I don't believe how can we not solve this problem. But to be a nationalist is a very easy thing. To only say you can be a nationalist with 5 sentences. But to be a Democrat, you need 500 sentences. Because you need to engage with other people.
I'm also taking some of the questions from the audience, so we're going to tone it down a little bit. And one of our audience members wants to know, and I don't know if you have time for this, but what do you do in your personal times? What hobbies do you have? What sports do you play? If you have time to do it.
I have to start with the sentences, I used to do this, I used to do that, I used to play basketball, and so many things, but those are all with I used to, unfortunately.
Well, hopefully you'll get into a gym one day and continue to do your basketball. But there is a concern, and I voiced this last year in my interview, with everything that's happening in Turkey, and certainly there's the Hrant Dink precedent. Are you not afraid for your own life? Because you seem to be walking around doing all of these things, advocating for justice and democracy. Are you afraid that the same fate will come to you as it did to Dink?
No, I have no right to be afraid. No, I'm not afraid at all. But what I'm afraid of can be because Hrant Dink was a trauma for all the Armenian people. No, I have no right to make my people to live another trauma because I know they care about me. They pray for me. I have millions of people praying for me. That's very important. And if God cares about it, nothing is going to happen because millions of people are praying for me. So my fear is about my people. First of all, of course, the Armenians, but all my friends, the Turks, Turkish and Kurdish and other identities, Democrats, of course, and all the people as well, because people starts his or her life with nationalist thoughts. I care about everyone. But the problem is that this nationalist atmosphere, this vicious circle, might break another earthquake. Nobody could say that in 1912 or 13 the First World War is going to start. Even in Europe or Turkey, nobody could say that. But at the end of a nationalist atmosphere, we just suffered the First World War. But the world didn't take a lesson out of that First World War, and we suffered the Second World War. After that, we lived about 50 years, as I said, liberal order. Now, again, we are losing it, and it is going to, for sure, if this conjuncture goes on like this, atmosphere goes on like this, for sure it is going to break another earthquake. And if that earthquake happens, the minorities will suffer, first of all, because of that earthquake. And we just lost almost Halep, let's say. We are losing, let's say, Egypt, Egyptian Armenians as well. And all the Muslim majority countries, we are losing the Christians. And at the end, we will have the Muslim world and the Christian world. It is no good. Because, when they see me, in the parliament, let's say there are 550 MPs in the parliament, and there are 3 Christians there, when they see us, they can say, oh, Garo Paylan and Marka Reseyan, Selina Doğan, let's say, they see us and they touch us somehow, even the nationalist ones. And they had biased thoughts against the Armenians, of course, but now even the nationalist ones touches us and we touch them. And if they don't have a chance to touch an Armenian, a Christian, let's say, those biased thoughts will be stronger against the Armenians or the Christians. and they will be more radical Islamist, or vice versa. That is no good for the world's fate. So we have to consider to keep diverse, safe havens in the Muslim world and in the Christian world as well.
Garo, thank you very much, as always. You are a true inspiration, and we're going to continue the fight together for the justice that our nation deserves. Thank you.
Thank you.
And as a token of appreciation, we have these frames for you, Garo. And at this time, I'd like to invite Nora Hovsepian to the stage to give closing remarks.
Okay, so what did you guys think about this conference? Our committee, as I said, worked extra